Everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Zee Garcia. Hello and welcome back, everybody.
As we continue to go through our decade in retrospective, as we go back year by year, this is our fourth one.
That's right, 2013. We're going to be talking about all sorts of games. We're going to be telling you some of our greatest games from that year. We'll talk about some of yours. But before we do any of that, we got to do some shout-outs.
Yes, first of all, we want to do a shout-out to Bad Crow Games.
Ooh, Bad Crow.
To Matho Veliquet and Pascal Labine.
Those are cool names, both of them. I like them.
And to Strategos Games and Sebastian Alvarez. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the support. All right, so we are going to be talking about 4 categories to break down this video. We're going to be talking about top games of the years. We'll be using BGG for that. We're going to talk trends that we spotted this year, things that were coming to the forefront, and then we'll do our picks for the year, followed by your picks from the year, as you'll tell us in the comments, so we can have a little discussion about that. So, what do you say we take a look at what's hopping in 2013?
Yeah, so I
was a young boy in 2013.
Yesterday we talked about how 2012 was a fantastic year.
It was indeed a fantastic year.
And I went and was looking yesterday, and I agree, and you can tell that as we look at the games from 2013.
What happened in 2013?
Well, if you remember in 2012, I believe I said there was 10 or 11 games in the top 100.
Yes.
2013 has 4. And this is the last time you'll see this few. There's definitely, again, a cult of the new on Board Game Geek, but this year is definitely a drop in quality after 2012.
Yes.
That does not mean that I think it's a bad year.
Right.
It just didn't aspire to the heights that 2012 did. And we'll talk a bit more about that in trends. Highest rated game of the year, Concordia.
Which is interesting. I would have figured it was Caverna, not Concordia. But that game does have a lot of love. And this new cover, the game was reprinted not long after it came out with a much better cover. Not to say it's a good cover, but it was better than the original one. Oh, boy.
Oh, you can, yeah.
This is the newer one, and it's a little bit better, yes.
Then Eldritch Horror was the first 2 we mentioned in Concordia and Caverna were the big Essen releases. Eldritch Horror was one of the big Gen Con releases. In fact, they announced it at Gen Con.
And it was available.
And we know this
there, right?
because Z and I got invited to a secret game.
That's right.
Which we showed up and, hey, it was Eldritch Horror.
Yep.
And we played through it. This was a sequel to Arkham Horror, and eventually, within a year, replaced Arkham Horror for them.
Just about, yeah. And it did not take very long for us to start talking about Fantasy Flight games here, as you can tell. So they were still doing quite well.
Russian Railroads is almost a forgotten game, which is weird because it's 71. I put this game in the library for Dice Tower. I don't think anyone's played it yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I like it, but it's definitely has nothing to do with trains. It's all point salad type things.
Maybe that's it. Maybe the fact that train gamers don't find it to be a train game, and those that normally avoid train games haven't given it a closer look.
Yeah, this is an interesting, there's several games this year like that. The next one is the same way. Nations, which was a big, grandiose, wasn't that big, but it was a bigger Civilization-style game. Again, never hear anyone talk about it.
Right.
Do you?
No, I don't.
The next one got more love, actually. Not for me. You can see my rating of 5 there. Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark, I do enjoy it. It's a very pretty game. Again, it comes out from that school of attractive, interesting games from France. I like it myself much better than you do, though I don't like it with the higher player counts. The game has a serious scaling problem in which each new player to the table will easily add about 30 minutes to the play length.
Yeah.
So if you're playing with 2, great. You're playing with 3, okay. More than that, you're sitting down to a fairly fast-moving, quick game, not a deep game that'll still take you two plus hours. So that's the main issue there, in my opinion. But it is very highly rated.
Feld kind of, I think his biggest games had already come out, Castles of Burgundy and Trajan. Now Bora Bora was like, oh, it's kind of like Trajan, and it was a lot like Trajan with the South Seas theme to it, but it definitely, he did not have the grandiose hits that he had before that.
Right. At this point, nobody was any longer questioning whether Feld had taken over Alea. He had.
That's true.
Pretty much.
This was 2 games in a row.
Yeah, the line was his, or at least this level of the line. Alea has, had small games and larger boxes and so on. This line had evolved from games from all sorts of different publishers or designers, rather, doing Euro-style games to being where his games came out. And he was so prolific, his games were coming out not just from Alea, but Trajan wasn't from that, and several others were not from Alea.
Bruges was another game of his. I'm mentioning these together. And Bruges was nominated for the Spiel, or one of the, maybe Kenner Spiel.
Right.
And that one got a lot of positive buzz, although the number of owners here is not as high as I thought it might be.
That's interesting. That one, I'll talk about it a little bit later because I do really, really love it.
Battle Lore, 2nd edition for Fantasy Flight, Rococo, which brought a different style theme. We had already seen it with Pret-a-Porter, actually, first. But Rococo had a more accessible game. Hanamani Koji, which honestly in 2013 got almost no love. This is a later edition.
Yeah, this is the later printing of that game.
So while this was a 2013 game, I don't even think I heard the name of it in 2013.
Well, you certainly weren't pronouncing it correctly.
I'm still not pronouncing it.
I know. Hanami Koji is what we're talking about, by the way. Just in case anybody's
Hanamana Koji.
In case someone's only listening to this, Hanami Koji.
Glass Road from Uwe Rosenberg.
Yep.
Brussels, 1893. They just did a sequel to this one. It came out. There was a lot of Euro games. BattleCon, Devastation of Endines, which was a sequel to the first Endines game. 1775 Rebellion, which was a sequel to 1812. Firefly. This was a pretty big release. This was one of the ones that people ran for at Gen Con. It was like Firefly, because Firefly, I don't know, still for all the love, Firefly. It's a critical
darling, or it's a cult classic.
It is a cult classic, right?
Yes.
And so Gale Force 9 had already done the Spartacus game.
Yes.
And so people were like, well, then this must be good.
Right.
And I remember people ran for Firefly that year.
And a lot of people do like it. It is highly rated. I dislike this game quite a bit. I think it's simply too long, and it just barely moves. It's a very slow game. Not for me, but again, it did get a lot of love. And then we go back to Stefan Feld, and the battle between he and Uwe Rosenberg for Euro Designer of the Decade rages on.
These guys were definitely fighting here.
They were going mano a mano here.
Forbidden Desert was an interesting follow-up to Forbidden Island, because Forbidden Island was very, very light. It was a great game, but very light. Forbidden Desert took it up a notch, but still was available in big box stores.
Yeah.
You could find it at Target, which I mentioned yesterday, and you could find, and it was a game that people started noticing who were not gamers.
Right. Yeah, for me it felt like Forbidden Island, the first one, felt like Pandemic Junior in many ways. Forbidden Desert did not. It felt like a new evolution of this cooperative concept, at least from Matt Leacock. So I was very enamored by it.
157 was Viticulture, and now we jump down here and we see that 354 was Euphoria. So while Viticulture had been kickstarted the previous year, this was the year that Jamie Stegmaier's games landed. Viticulture did fairly well. Euphoria did better initially, as far as I could tell, critical praise. Although as time went by, Stegmaier went bigger and bigger. And we'll talk. I know the game that brought him the critical mass. But these two were a good thing where people started saying, wow, there's a company out here, a small company that did Kickstarter games that are pretty solid.
Right.
Which was not necessarily, Kickstarter was still, I want to say in its infancy. It's just only 5 years ago. But
well, it hadn't exploded like it has now. That's simply true. We could not have done around this time crowd surfing. We couldn't have.
We could. It would have been like every 3 months.
Right. It's just
here's our roundup. Our quarterly roundup.
The same. Right.
Pathfinder Adventure game was a pretty big one. You'll notice a lot of ratings on this one here. This was the card game version of Pathfinder, and Mike Selinker was involved with this. This one, they buzzed, I want to say, almost a year ahead of time.
Yeah.
I definitely heard about this in 2012, and people were like, ooh, it's coming, it's coming. It's like a deck builder, and it really wasn't a deck builder.
No, it's not really a deck builder. It's an adventure game. It's a role-playing game with cards.
I was about to say, it barely touches the board game thing.
Yeah.
It's role-playing, it just happens to have cards.
Yeah.
The most owned game or most rated game of the year is Sushi Go, though. Gamewright has been around for a long time. Gamewright has made a lot of small little card games, Sleeping Queens and all this stuff. Didn't get much buzz from gamers at all.
Right.
It was a company for kids. Sushi Go still can be played by kids, but for some reason, a small little game from Phil Walker Harding, actually. I think he did Sushi Go, right?
Yeah.
This game just exploded as one of the gateway games.
Yeah.
Just drafted. You talked about a couple of days, I keep saying a couple of years ago, a couple of days ago about Seven Wonders,
yeah.
bringing drafting to the forefront, but Sushi Go made it accessible.
Yes.
If you couldn't understand Sushi Go, then don't play games, basically. It was that simple.
And they had a great year. You know, Gamewright had this, and they had the previous year had Forbidden Island, so now Forbidden Desert. They were really firing on all cylinders and appealing to tons more people. You're right. Because before, it was, Sleeping Queens and Slamwich and all that stuff. And now they still had that target audience and now had a whole slew of people that weren't interested by them before.
This one of the games is interesting. We see lots of interesting games here. Nothing that's like mega hits, although Bang the Dice game has had some pretty long legs. You can see 17,000 ratings.
Right.
This, what's it? Tom Zee, I don't know how to pronounce it at the bottom.
That is, that was the original Mysterium, of course.
It was, but this was one of those games that people were like, have you played this?
Yes.
Have you played this? And I was like, I can't pronounce it. How can I play it? But it went around, and for a while, it wasn't reprinted.
That's right.
Ignacy did this one initially, didn't he?
He carried it in Poland. He did not print an English version of it.
Right, so people were getting it.
And I remember being at a convention, and he gave me a copy.
And it was like,
and it was really exciting, because they were not available. So, there was definitely that speaking in whispers vibe around this game. And it was like, it's kind of like Dixit, but co-op and very new concept. Like you said, we talked a few days ago about this idea of Dixit bringing in a new kind of party game experience. This one followed that up with this mysterious, sort of nebulous description of what you are trying to achieve in the game. Mysterium did that, the original.
Ignacy at Portal was still experimenting at this point,
Yes.
trying that. This Legacy, the Testament Duke de Creci, most people haven't heard of that game, but that was one that came out at this point.
And a very good game.
Concept's a really unique party game. Another one that has a
Yes.
lot of ratings, 13,000. Where it wasn't almost a game, it was just 20 questions, essentially, with a
Kind
board.
of Pictionary without drawing. That's sort of how it felt to me when I played it, The original printing of A Study in Emerald came out.
Yeah, Martin Wallace kind of turned a corner. Somewhere, I don't know which year, he had shut his own company down, and now he was doing a studio. A Study of Emerald may be one of the last couple games he did.
Right.
But people looked at him and said, oh, he's not doing these big Euro games. This is something different. He was experimenting a bit.
Yeah, he definitely became a designer I liked much more after that shift in his philosophy.
Terra Meeple City was a game that when they first showed it to me in 2012, I was like, what is this amazing? Flicking, dexterity, cool pieces.
The original name was not Terror in Meeple City, right?
It was Rampage.
Rampage.
Which they got in trouble eventually because that's the name of the movie, and it was the exact same theme.
Yeah, is that what it was called, Rampage? I forget exactly what it was called, but it had a different title, and they backed off of that title, reprinted with another one.
You also notice 8-Minute Empire Legends here, and I think a little bit farther down, City of Iron there. And both of those were the beginning of Ryan Laukait's Red Raven thing. I mean, 8-Minute Empire had come out the previous year, but it was one game.
Right.
It was a small game. It was like, oh, that's cool. Another Kickstarter thing. And then 8-Minute Legends, okay, it's a sequel. And then he had done the space one, and now the City of Iron. I was like, wait, who is this guy?
Right.
This is cool. He still hadn't hit, I guess, critical mass that big time. that game was
at
still
this
coming. It
point,
might have
I
been
would-
above and below. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, at this point, but you could start to tell that there's this company whose games all look similar and who have a design sensibility to them that makes the whole company cohesive. In many ways, kind of like Stonemaier. You know, they started
Yes.
around the same time, and you could tell, you could say, hey, this feels like a Stonemaier game, but you could say that even more so for Ryan Lockett and his games because, well, the illustration is all by him, and it has a very specific look. So, yeah, and now we don't even think about it. Now you see a cover from him, and you go, Ryan Lockett game.
Right.
It's very cool.
Two Rooms and a Boom made some noise. Haha. But I mean, it was an alternative to Werewolf, and that was another Kickstarter that really pushed. Rise of Augustus was a game that surprisingly did really
Yeah,
well.
it did well from Hurricane Games. Hurricane Games, since then, has actually backed off of making anything but two-player games, apparently, is their current
Really?
ideology, yeah.
Huh.
The idea for them now is we're just making two-player only games. In fact, the Madame Ching game that they made sometime after this was one of the last games they did that was a multiplayer game. They attempted to republish that game when they changed their mindset as a two-player only game. Those plans fell away. But it was after that game that they decided to just sort of change what they were offering. It's hard to only put out two-player games, but that's what they're doing.
The Welcome to the Dungeon was an interesting one. This was originally called Kingdom of Mandom.
Yes, I think so.
This was another Japanese game. We talked about that yesterday. But this started a new line of games, or was at least the first one that people noticed of Yellow made some smaller games. They had done maybe a few others, but this one, as you can see, 10,000 ratings, was one of the ones that really came to the forefront.
It's got a lot of play. I remember seeing it being played a lot at conventions, game stores. Yeah, it was getting a lot of traction.
Hey, there's Gravel. We just talked about this morning.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple. Patch History was a game that kind of brought Korea to the forefront, where people were looking at that game.
We have a big award winner there in Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters.
That one, Kinderspiel?
That was the Kinderspiel winner for that year. And again, a cooperative game. In many ways, Pandemic Junior with some dice rolling. A great game, by the way. If you haven't played Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, you really should find yourself a copy. It's easy to find, very fun game.
During this time frame, if I'm remembering correctly, Greater Than Games bought Dice Hate Me Games, and we saw the Compound It, the Brew Crafters above. And you see some other games here, but you can see already before I'm getting to the bottom of this page, a lot of these games aren't as well known. You may have heard of a few of them, but a lot of these, like Asante, which was the sequel to Jambo.
Sure, or reworking of it.
Look at that, it's 1582. That feels really low for that kind of game. Happy Pigs, which was kind of a mismatch of theme and mechanisms. It's a stock market game. And yeah, there's some really cool games on here, but it's a very different year than 2012. There's not a lot of games on here that if I call out the name in a room of gamers, they would know. Well, 2012, I feel like I could do it with 10 games.
Sure.
Here, I don't know that I could do it with maybe more than 2.
And speaking of that, the trends were also not as strong this year as the previous year. You know, 2011, 2012 had all put things into play that felt like brand new ideas. 2013, not so much, but we've got a couple here. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the trends. I'm going to start off with one that I'm going to imagine you have as well, Tom, and that is there were a lot of families of games this year. And by that I mean it was clear that companies had noticed, much like, movie companies notice, it's a lot better for us to come out with a sequel to something, a repackaging of something, than to come out with a brand new IP, an unproven game. And so you had things like, Eldritch Horror. Felt very much like a repackaging, streamlined Arkham.
Oh, it's not even called. It is a repackaging of Arkham Horror,
That's what they were going for. Carcassonne South Seas, Forbidden Desert came out. Level 7 had Escape, which many people didn't like. And even so, they tried again. You'd think you come up with Level 7 Escape, folks say it's not a good game, you scrap that idea, right?
Sure.
They figured it was still better to come up with another game called Level 7 Omega Protocol than just begin with a new thing. That's what I'm talking about, right? They were like, you know what? Brand recognition is brand recognition. We don't even care if the first one didn't do well. put out another one in that universe.
Well, the number 2 game of the year, Caverna.
Absolutely. Caverna
Was a reprint. It was like,
it was like a wink to Agricola.
It was a little bit more than that. It was Agricola wearing a different lipstick.
Kinda, yeah. I mean,
And
we had
prettier.
one of my favorites of the
smarter.
year, Phantom of the Opera, which was in the Mr. Jack line.
That's true. Yeah, this year didn't. I'd be hard pressed to think of innovative as like the keyword for this year.
Sure. It was more let's get that Hollywood sort of mentality going here. And not to say that there hadn't been sequels and all that before, right? I mean, Tikal 2 had come out 2009, I think it was. So it was happening, but not with this frequency. It was just, now it was an established concept. You want to keep selling games, you create a line, you create a setting and keep putting out games. That's the way to do it.
The year was, like I said, it was not a year of stunning new stuff, although, again, there's great games. Don't be careful. It was a year where Euro games were king, and it's a year of pivoting by game companies. All right, we'd already seen Level... Who made a Firefly?
Gale Force 9.
Gale Force 9. Catalyst Games, they had been BattleTech for all these years.
Yes.
They made a bunch of games in 11 and 12, which were not very good. We kind of smashed most of them. But this year they came out with the Duke. And also some other decent games as time went by, and they became a little bit more known for board gaming, and they pivoted into that even more. Paizo pivoted from RPG into a pseudo board game, and Stonemaier became their own company. We saw these companies coming up. Cool Mini or not, I went to their convention this year. They were pivoting from being... when I went to their headquarters, and I went there in 2013, it was miniatures.
Right.
Everything was miniatures this, and they're like, oh yeah, we also got these upcoming games, Arcadia Quest and Rum and Bones, but they're basically miniature games and a board. But they were turning into a board game company, and they didn't know it.
All right, one more for me here. This year there were a lot of group games as well. This became a big thing. Group games where you don't know who's who, especially. There were some of those, certainly. But man, there were a lot this year. And from game styles you wouldn't even expect. Like Two Rooms and a Boom we talked about. Party game, right? We had already had Cards Against Humanity was from 2009, so that had happened already. So that's 10 years old now. And so the party game for adults vibe was established there, or at least made popular there. Then you combine that with this idea of now who's who can you trust? You get Two Rooms and a Boom. You get Nosferatu, a lesser known little game where again you don't know who to trust. Mayday, an underrepresented game certainly, but one again where you don't know who's who. Ultimately, a lot of these are werewolf with more structure, right? With more game to it. But you also had others like Bloodbound from FFG, again, way underperformed, but it was another...
I don't know why.
Another attempt at that. Big group, you don't know who to trust. Room 25 did it. And we mentioned A Study in Emerald. Actually is a group game where you don't know who's on your team at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, a really weird one, actually.
And that's a Euro game. That is a Cthulhu-esque Euro game. But it's that whole you don't know who's on your team thing. So a lot of team games came out this year, and that seemed a big push.
Now, we have been talking about how 2012, I think, is better than 2013. I realize, and some people mentioned this in comments, that they think 2013 is better for them. But we're talking industry as a whole. I think more things came out in 2012 that were better and affected the industry as a major thing.
Right.
You know, X-Wing and Netrunner and all these different games. I'm not saying that you personally might like 2013 better.
Absolutely.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
For us, 2013 was a pretty strong year for the Dice Tower.
Right.
On a personal level, my second game and my first game that sold more than 50 copies was published.
Right.
So nothing personal was published in 2013, so that was nice. We did our first 24-hour marathon. And so I said, all right, Sam and Z, you come. And then I joined, a bunch of other people came from our gaming group. And the reason Sam and Z were in that was because 2013 is the year we started top 10 lists. Our first big top 10 list was in February 2013.
Wow.
And then at some point, after we did these, we did the People's. I had been doing my top 100, so I decided to do the first People's Choice. And Z did that, which for some reason you get the moniker Voice of the People, probably because of Eric Herman's song or something. I don't know.
That must be it. I honestly don't recall why I
I think I just said your voice of the people.
Yeah, that's
You're
probably
doing the People's Choice Top 100.
There you go.
And we were starting to go to some more conventions.
Yes.
This was the first year I did Kickstarter, and I went full time, so I was able to go to more conventions. And I distinctly remember the Gen Con. I still didn't go to Essen yet at this point.
Right.
I think this was the last year I didn't go to Essen because I remember Caverna, and I wanted Caverna, so someone brought it back for me. But yeah, it was a good year for us. It was an interesting year, but I think if you were looking at a graph, you see 2012, a little bit down to 2013, and then it's just going to be kind of a straight line up. You'll see tomorrow when we talk about 2014.
Yep. All right, let's talk about a couple of games here, though. We have sprinkled it around. Let's mention some of our picks, and I'm going to start with the one that hasn't come up yet, actually. Relic Runners. Relic Runners from Days of Wonder is not one of their bigger hits, but it is one of their more gorgeous games. It is an extremely lavish production, beautiful idols made of plastic but then painted with parts that are translucent to look like gems. You are running around the jungle, so it's got an Indiana Jones vibe going on, and it is just a really fun game. And I replayed this game this year, in fact, a little more thinky than I remember it being. It is not
being thinky.
It's not Ticket to Ride. It's a connection game, but it's not Ticket to Ride. You are gathering unique abilities that you then trigger by resetting those columns. It's got a little bit more going on. I really like this game, and I think it does not get enough love, honestly, in my opinion. So, Relic Runners, I really like.
From my point, and again, I think I want to emphasize how much I say 2012 was a really great year for gaming. 2013 has some of my personal favorites, though. Caverna, and I like these reworkings because I usually think the reworking takes the things I like about the game, makes it better.
Usually
Caverna,
right.
Eldritch Horror, and those are just two games that I've enjoyed for a long time, as well as I really liked Viticulture, but not in 2013. I thought it was okay. I remember giving it a 6. It's now ranked a 10 for me.
Yeah.
They changed the rule, and then they added an expansion later on.
Yeah, quite an expansion.
One, I do want to point out those Battle Lore 2nd Edition. It was weird, because I was like all on board with Richard Borg. And this was one of the first games of his that he did not touch. They took this, they used his original idea and completely changed it, and it was fantastic, which I didn't expect it to be because Battle Lore had soured on the original one that Days of Wonder did and passed on. But Battle Lore 2nd Edition and it still makes me sad that it's kind of out of print at this point. But I liked it.
Yeah. Okay, and then I'll mention one more then. I already talked about Forbidden Desert, so I won't mention that. But my favorite Stefan Feld game is from this year. Bruges is my favorite Stefan Feld game.
It might be mine too, actually. It's a pretty good game.
Because I like cards with powers. Cards with powers is one of my favorite things in gaming. The ability to trigger characters or unique abilities or what have you. And he didn't do that too much. It was a lot of this point salad sort of vibe with Feld. And Bruges felt a little bit different. There was still some of that going on the small board you were playing on, but it just felt like it had personality. And I hadn't found that in a lot of his games previously.
Sure.
I found them quite dry. Trajan, I still think, is lacking a soul, in my opinion, whereas Bruges did not feel that way,
The game's lacking a soul.
The game is lacking.
Feld is okay.
Feld is a beautiful man, I'm sure.
I know, he's taller than me.
How?
I don't know.
It's not possible. Not a real person. So there you go. Those are some of our picks.
I want to talk about one more.
One more pick. Okay.
Duel of Ages 2nd Edition.
Oh,
come on, let me get that in there.
Come on.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It was a long time coming because I think Duel of Ages came out around, I don't know, a decade earlier almost.
This was on Kickstarter, right?
It was not on Kickstarter. He did it himself.
Pre-ordered somehow?
Yeah, I think, or he just published it and he had the fan base going. It should have been Kickstarter, though.
Yeah.
2013 was still a year where you didn't necessarily kickstart stuff if you were new.
Oh, if it was today, there would be no question that it goes to Kickstarter.
If you didn't Kickstarter, I'd be like, wait, what? Are you a company?
Yeah.
Is your name Jamie Stegmaier?
Those
are the only two people.
A game with a limited audience like that, because it was a reprint of something that already some people liked, some people didn't. There's no question it would go to Kickstarter now. It absolutely would, yeah. That's why I thought it might have. But with you and your ridiculous pick of what is it?
Duel of Ages 2.
Duel of Ages 2 out of the way, let's talk about some of your picks, please. Let us know in the comments.
I better see nothing personal from every person. Probably not. I saw the
Somebody
ranking.
quoted you as saying, Tom, I know he's beautiful, about Stefan Feld.
I think, well, okay, fine. Nothing personal is ranked, what is it now? It is ranked 964, but it was as high as, I believe, 540 at one point.
964. I could have said that this morning in the game we played, and I would have done well.
Well, I was really hoping one of you would.
Oh.
All right.
All right, what do we got here? I have Duel of Ages 2, but have not gotten it to the table. That is a smart move, in my opinion.
Cash Guard did come out in 2013, but it got almost no buzz at all.
It was also only in German, so if you're a German speaker, sure, but I played it many years after that. It was just not available. In fact, it was one of those games that wouldn't be available in English for a while, and that this kept happening less and less as time went by.
In fact, when I first saw Cash Guard, I was surprised that it was still in that group.
Yeah.
Someone here said Spirium was a great little game. That's true.
It was.
Spirium was, we were surprised by it. It was a little game. The box didn't look very good. We put it out, we played, we're like, man, not so bad.
Yeah.
But it has gotten forgotten. Thunderstone Numenera. Oh, no, that's true. I almost mentioned that one. Mm-hmm. That's still one of my favorite. When I first heard about it, the Numenera, the 1,000 Years in the Future, but it was a cool universe.
Yeah.
And it had a cool component quality. It's still probably the best version of Thunderstone they put out.
As a solo standalone one, it had the coolest look. It just didn't mix with the other stuff very well. But yeah, I never did own any of the Thunderstone games. They weren't quite my speed. But I remember for a while when this one came out, I thought to myself, I kind of wanted the Numenera one. It looks really neat. I like this theme.
Yeah, Game Right, the Twice as Nice says they got into gaming from Game Right through Slamwich and Sushi Go.
Yep.
And Zombicide Season 2, the beginning of the endless Zombicide, sure. I remember when I first heard that announced, I thought, wasn't there already a ton of Zombicide stuff as there was? We're going to have a second one? I didn't realize we were going to end up with that many Zombicides as time went by.
Well, again, those families, right? They sell well, like I was talking about.
Yeah, Francis Drake. This was
Francis Drake that came out that year, yeah. And apparently Bruges, someone's saying here, is really out of print right now, and they need to reprint that, huh?
I thought you would mention Steam Park. That's a quirky game that not a lot of people play.
It is a quirky game. I ended up sort of losing a little bit of interest in it and let my copy of it go. But Steam Park was neat, and it was a very pretty game. Same artist as the original Dixit. So it was a cool look to the whole thing. It felt different. Yeah, I like Steam Park. Steam Park's a cool game. And what else have we got?
Boss Monster. Boss Monster has done really well.
Yes.
That company is off the ground. They've made several other games since then.
Yeah.
And Boss Monster has, I was just talking to him about the numbers for Boss Monster at PAX this year, and it's done really better than most companies have any of their board games do.
Well, something else that happened around this time, I was actually going to mention it last year we talked about, is I believe when Pixel Tactics came out. But it was around this time that the pixel craze began.
Yeah.
With Boss Monster following Pixel Tactics. And suddenly, everybody figured out that, hey, I can do artwork too. If
Pixel Lincoln was around here.
Lincoln. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. Theseus Dark Orbit from Ignacy was one of those weird games he tried, which is not actually that bad of a game.
Right.
But it really only works well with two. And it's a really funky game, and it just didn't do well at all.
Right, right. Yeah, I played it, and I had it for a short amount of time, but it simply was a little too esoteric to get to the table.
Yeah, I thought, oh, this is a neat game, but after he made... It was the year after, I think, Imperial Settlers came out or whatever, and he hit that groove and such. Yeah, so that's that, I guess. You know, it was a pretty good year. To 2013. Again, we're comparing 2013 to 2012 and 2014. Compared to any year the decade before that, or any 3 years in the 90s,
Sure.
Still an amazing year.
Sure.
So don't get us wrong. We're just comparing it amongst its fellow years. And this was definitely a year where you and I were both deep end in the hobby at this point.
Right.
You still had a job, and yet you were playing games all the time.
Well, I have a job now, Tom.
Yeah, it's true. I meant a real job.
That's true. I did have a real job. I remember what dignity felt like back then. Yeah, it's been a long time.
So, all righty, we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow I got another top 10 list, and then our retrospective on 2014. We'll be halfway through tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
So,
all right, everybody, thanks very much for joining us. We love your discussion, you throwing games out at us, talking about them. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to see you later on. So, it's going to be it for this one.
I'm Tom Vassell.
I am Z Garcia. Thanks, everybody.
Have fun gaming.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching another Dice Tower video. If you enjoy our videos, subscribe to the channel for more fun, comprehensive board game coverage. Also, consider joining us at one of our events. Come to Dice Tower Retreat, a small, intimate gathering where gaming is king. Join us for Dice Tower Cruise, the largest board game cruise. Attend Dice Tower West in Las Vegas for gaming fun on the West Coast, or Dice Tower East in Orlando, in sunny Florida. Dice Tower Conventions, the friendliest gaming conventions on Earth. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.